So JD Vance and his weird obsession with people who don't have children continues, folks. This guy just gets more and more weird by the minute. I've never seen someone so fixated and so, as he says in his own words, disturbed and disoriented by people who don't have children. I don't know about you guys, but I just believe in a simple America where we just live and let live. And in the words of Tim Walz, we just mind our own damn business. I live at the end of my street. I don't know exactly how many houses I pass on the way home every day, but I never stop and think about how many children do they have? How many children do they have? Are they raising their children the same way I'm raising mine? I don't think about that. I just figure we'll all raise our families or not raise our families, and we can all be productive members of society and go on about our day. I don't understand why this guy is so fixated on it unless it's all about control. And I truly believe that that's where we're always going to land with JD and this radical extremism that is MAGA. It's always going to be about control. And according to JD Vance, he says that atheists and agnostics have no morals. They just have, and they live miserable lives. And I have heard this argument so many times over the years. I'm agnostic myself. So people are always saying, where do you get your morals? Where do you get your values? We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But here is JD Vance in another unearthed video clip talking about how miserable atheists and agnostics are and how we don't know how to raise our kids. Take a look.
I have fully developed views on this, but to me what it is sort of a value system to replace the fact that they're all fundamentally atheist or agnostic. They have no real value system. Their only value system is achieve in a very conventional way. And so the idea that somehow they're pursuing racial or gender equity is like the value system that gives their life meaning. Well, of course, they all find that that value system leads to misery, leads to unhappiness. And so I think that what happens is, like, whenever you really pursue something, right? Like, let's say a doctor gives you a medicine to cure a disease and it doesn't work, right? The patient gets worse. Well, you can conclude one of two things. Either the medicine isn't working or the patient was so sick that what they need is even more of the medicine that you originally prescribed. And I think the gender inequity stuff is like, we need more of the medicine. Okay, clearly this value set has made me a miserable person who can't have kids because I already, passed the biological period when it was possible. And I live in a 1,200 square foot apartment in New York and I pay $5,000 a month for it. But I'm really better than these other people. What I'm going to do is project my like racial and gender sensitivities on the rest of them. And like the reason that our society is broken is because these people don't think the exact way that I think. Even though the way that I think has made me a miserable person, I just need to make more people think like that. So we're going to teach this in our schools, in our universities, even in our elementary schools, because once everybody agrees with me, then everything will finally come full circle and we'll have a happy, healthy society.
That last half of what he said right there was nothing but projection. That's exactly who they are. When he says they don't think the way I think and that's made me a miserable person, he's the one that's fixated on people that don't think like he thinks. He's the one that's fixated on people that's not having children and raising them the way that he would like to raise them. They're the ones that wants to teach this stuff in school. They're the ones that really feels that once everyone agrees with them, then America's going to be great again. So that last half was nothing but projection. I mean, I'm sitting there listening to that going, JD, that's exactly what you guys are saying. You're the ones that thinks that everyone should be thinking and living exactly like you. And for those of us who have been reading Project 2025, we understand that you want to install the American family in place the way that you believe the American family should be. Well, you don't get to define what the American family is, okay? Because there is all types of families out there, and you're not the one that gets to define that. We have a right as Americans to raise our families or not have a family, whatever we choose. We have the right to do that without having the government get involved in it and tell us what we're doing. So if you have 5 kids and a grandson, or you have 1 child or no kids, or you're a same-sex couple that has children, whatever the case may be, you have the right to raise your family the way you want to, and raise your children the way that you feel what is best for them in this world. And then if you're a reasonable person, you're willing to let them go out there into the world and find themselves. But when he talks about how says that atheists and agnostics have no real value system, that offends me because I became agnostic over the years. I was raised in church. I was raised to believe that the Bible was the word of God. But from the time that I was a little kid, I just simply had questions, and I thought they were fair. I wasn't trying to ask questions to rock the boat. although I was told that that's what I was doing. I wasn't asking questions to rebel, even though that's what I was told I was doing. You're just being rebellious now by asking these questions. But as a young kid, I just asked fair, reasonable questions in Sunday school, to the point that the Sunday school teacher had me removed from class. And they had me sit out and listen to the minister because they said, well, maybe you're a little bit more advanced than the other students, so we'll put you out here. And I never will forget when the Sunday school teacher and the minister and my mom had the conversation. And the Sunday school teacher said, he's asking questions and I'm losing control of the class. He's disrupting class by asking questions. And I was like, I'm just simply asking questions. I just want to know the answers to these questions I have. And the minister, I'll never forget what he said. He said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll have you sit out and just listen to me preach. I can work on you out there. And I didn't realize at the time exactly what he was saying until I got much older and realized what he meant by I can work on you when I get you out there. What he was trying to do was groom me to follow and believe exactly like they believed. But the questions I asked, if you're wondering what I asked, the questions that got me removed from Sunday school weren't tough questions. The teacher at one point was talking about how the only way to get to heaven was through Jesus Christ, and you had to be born again. And if you wasn't born again, you couldn't make it into heaven. Well, I immediately thought about people that may have never heard about Jesus Christ. So I raised my hand and said, what about people in different countries who have never heard of him? If they live a good, clean life and they never really sin or do anything wrong, then why should they go to hell just because they never heard of this guy? And he said, oh, I'm sure they've heard of him. And I'm like, how? How have they heard of him? Well, I'm sure they have. I'm sure he revealed himself to them at some point. And I'm like, when? When did he do it? And then I dug in a little bit deeper and I was like, hold on a second. What about the Native Americans? What about the people that were over here in America that weren't over there where he was? They didn't have, television. They didn't have phones back then. How could he have got the information over here? Oh, he did. He revealed himself to them. He even went so far as to tell me that while Jesus was in the grave, he came to America, which I later learned was a Mormon belief. And I'm hearing that in a Pentecostal church. This guy was literally just pulling stuff out of his ass. And as a kid, I could tell that he was. I could tell that his answers were just to get me to shut up and move on. And I was disrupting his class. And as I grew up and began to ask more questions, I began to get away from that. And I didn't realize at the time that this was even a word, but I began to deconstruct from the way that I was groomed to believe as a kid. And when I did, that's when I began to feel the misery. That's when I began to feel all the misery and pain start to fade away. It was when I began to deconstruct from religion and not live under that fear. I no longer live under the fear that I'm going to be judged one day by a being who's going to have a book and he's going to open it up and he's going to do a tally of everything I ever said and done. And then he's going to be the judge and the jury and the executioner to send me to eternal damnation. Once you escape that type of belief and you learn to accept the truth, you learn to accept facts, you're not offended by them. Once you learn that and you get away from that upbringing, then you get away from that misery. So again, I feel like that's a lot of projection. I think the miserable people are MAGA. If you watch any of their rallies, listen to Trump or Vance talk at any point, they're the ones that are miserable. They're the ones that are absolutely miserable, and they're miserable because other people aren't thinking like them. They're offended that, hey, the rest of the world isn't buying into our propaganda and our bullshit. I went to a Harris Walls event recently in Knoxville, Tennessee. Harrison Walls wasn't there, but it was people that had gathered to speak on behalf of Harrison Walls. There were speakers there that got up and spoke about a brighter future, and everybody there was excited. There was good energy there on Market Square. Everybody felt good. I didn't feel like there was judgment. We weren't sitting there hearing all this doom and gloom. So I just think that the contrast between MAGA and the rest of us couldn't be any more obvious. I just feel like that they're the ones that are truly miserable, and wanting everyone to live and think and raise their families exactly the same way. I just don't find that to be an America I want to live in. I just don't. I'm perfectly okay with there being a diverse group of families in my neighborhood. I don't care, how the family down the street's raising their kids. I feel like that children are smart enough to grow up and find themselves and find their way. And some do, and unfortunately some don't. But that's just the way life goes. If my children grows up and has a different way of thinking than me, I'm not going to disown them for it. I'm not going to throw them under the bus. I'm not going to call them miserable if they come up with a new way of thinking. I'm not going to project my beliefs onto them. I believe in letting them find their own way. And for whatever reason, J.D. Vance is terrified of his children finding their own way. and talking to someone who is of a different belief system. But these videos and audios of him just keeps coming out more and more. And we see that for whatever reason, he's fixated on people that don't have children and don't raise them up exactly the way that he wants to see them raised. But folks, I really appreciate you guys so much for listening to this video. Right now, we are closing in on 300,000 subscribers here on the channel. And I really appreciate each and every one of you for coming along on this ride with me. It's been a hell of a ride. We're at 298,710 at the time I'm making this video, recording it anyway. And every time I refresh my phone, it jumps up a little bit more. So we're going to hit 300,000 in the coming days. And I truly appreciate each and every one of you for listening. And I get messages from people all the time saying, I don't have kids. Thank you for taking up for us. Well, it's just the right thing to do. I'm not going to place judgment. If you don't want to have children, don't. If you want to have children and raise them up the way you feel is the best way for them to go, do that. And I have faith that the kids will be okay.